Like, I don't really care. Alright guys, part 3 F to S. We're C rank now. 16:27. Let me check what time at the VOD this is so I know when to highlight it. I'm just gonna screenshot this real quick. We're 16:27 right now, C rank, and yeah, we're just gonna continue this F to S. I feel like last time I mentioned that. Well, let's check these maps first, because I have to veto them properly for you guys. Yeah, so this is pretty much like what you want to run with. Last time, I think we established that around C rank, people start getting kind of decent. So I think I'm just gonna play normally now. I'm not gonna do like any kind of contrived build, and I'll just try and add as much commentary as I can, because ultimately I think especially with StarCraft, probably what helps the most is just showing you guys kind of what the meta is. And this guy has an excellent name, and kind of talking you through the ideas. And I think hopefully you can pick you can pick some of these ideas up for yourself, and then kind of converge your play towards those ideas. I'll try not to play too fast either. I'll just be like kind of chill, slow, and just explain. I'm doing some mineral boosting here, but you don't really have to pay attention to it too much. But if you do want to pay attention to it, you can kind of learn a bit as well. So this top mineral patch here is pretty well known. You have to return cargo on this SCV. But it doesn't really affect anything, to be completely honest with you guys, especially not at this level. But maybe you can kind of understand what some of the pros do. For example, this SCV, when it mines at the top part of the patch here, it returns faster than if you don't put it there, than if you let it just go to the normal spot. So that's why you see pro gamers doing stuff like this, and kind of like, what's it called? Making tutorials on it, because it can boost your build order just that much faster, but it's not really that big of a deal. Now in Polypoid, well, in TVP, I personally always recommend going for gas play. It's just more stable. And on Polypoid, I like to wall like this. I like to, for the most part, in this matchup, have a Rax depot wall by my ramp, because I don't know, it just works. I don't know how to explain it. You don't really want to give zealots too much space inside your main. So for example, if my Rax was here or here, to give you an extreme example, then there'd be so much space for the zealot to walk around. And if they bully you off of this ramp and eventually get dragoons into your base, that's how you instantly lose the game. Whereas if you control your ramp, once dragoons come, they're not that much of a threat. So here's what I usually do. 16 factory. Your factory should be around like 230, optimally. And then I start an SCV here. I'm gonna scout my opponent. First thing you want to look for is if a zealot's coming out, range getting started, how many pylons there are. This is a really early scout, so for now, only 2 pylons are going to be there. So range started, or it could be air weapons, but because there's only 2 pylons here, it's impossible for the Protoss to hide their tech, okay? And if you see that there's no zealot, so zealot is 100 minerals, and I think the best way to describe this rule of thumb is you have to, basically you either have to build a depot or a bunker, and you kind of match that 100 minerals. But because it's gonna be Dragoon opening here, I only need 3 Marines to fight this Dragoon off. Now you can also make a Vulture, but because I already have an SCV out on the map, it can re-scout the natural pretty consistently. And I know there's not a Zealot with this Dragoon, so I don't need this extra Vulture to defend. I will start my bunker first though, because there's, you know, against 2 Dragoons you can't really hold. And I will make a tank, you know, just very stable way. Now re-scouting in here is really, I mean, it helps quite a bit. We just seen expansion and we see this upgrade still going. So there cannot be DTs here, and that's really kind of the main thing you want to establish. There cannot be DTs. So I'm going to make a second tank, and if you open with a tank like this, you can make a second tank and then get mines. And because we know it's not DTs, we don't need to get an eBay right away. If it were DTs, you would, or if you cannot scout and confirm that it's not DTs, you would have to start your eBay around like 4:15 or whatever. Okay, but because we don't have to, because we've re-scouted successfully, we don't need to start the eBay right away. So instead you could have started like an armory slightly faster than what I did, but it's whatever. And now, because I saw the expansion as well as, well, that looks like a Robo, and then there's only 2 Dragoons, I know I can safely push out here. And really, I'm not trying to actually kill the Protoss with this push. I'm just trying to make space for my Vultures to get on the map, okay? And for now, you don't really want to... you don't really want to get any other upgrades because you want to start an eBay. So armor eBay is a very standard way to play. Well, we actually see an observatory, so I'm not even going to get an eBay. I don't really need an eBay. I'm just going to get an academy right away. Okay, that's a bit contrived, like, that's a bit esoteric, that decision making, but... and I can't really explain it fully. But basically, I would say eBay is a bit of an optional building, in a sense. What your actual, like, infrastructure... so, the academy is your actual infrastructure. Like, it's a building that you actually need as part of your build. Whereas the eBay is there just to defend you against, like, shuttles and stuff. But this game, I'm just gonna make 1 Goliath to defend. Because observers, like turrets, if you make turrets against like an observer build, it's just not that effective. Okay? So really that's the idea. And generally when your academy finishes, you wanna start your comsats right away. I'm just poking around with vultures for now. And now I'm gonna make a 3rd factory as well. And my upgrade is halfway done, so I'm gonna start my starport. I can make another Goliath. And here I'm gonna start speed for vultures, and I'm just chilling for now. I can scan, see what's up. Robotic Citadel plus 3rd base, so this is pretty much, you know, there's no shuttle. So this is very standard for my opponent. And it's basically an Arbiter build, so, you know, against Arbiter builds, you can basically just walk up to your expansion here and take it. If there's no shuttles being made, it's very easy to take this expansion, because it's very hard for Protoss to just bust tank mine with just pure goon. So starport finished. We're gonna make our science facility and our second armory. Also, I got this gas when my +1 started. Okay, and I'm just making units off these factories. I don't want to add factories just yet. I'm gonna add them after I start my my upgrades. Okay, just to make sure I have enough resources. And also, it's around now, like once your science facility, like once you get your science facility, your starport and everything's done, that you want to get your second add-on, okay? So there you go. Second add-on as well. And don't be too aggressive, I would say. I think the other mistake I made is not making an eBay right away. Don't be too aggressive with these vultures for now. You just want to make sure you don't die. So I'm going to start these upgrades. Get a bunch of SCVs here. And after I start my upgrades, you can see I also added a couple factories. So 5, 6 fact is good. Just depends on what you can afford. You can also, if you're feeling adventurous, you know, you can make a bunker here. You can make these marines stay at your third or in your main after the natural, okay? Because in your main is when they defend against stuff like shuttles, and then at your third they defend against kind of like busts, okay? And now I'm gonna run around with these vultures and mainly just mine the other expansion. So these vultures, they wanna basically keep Protoss from expanding too quickly, okay? You see, we find this now. And off of this factory count, generally, you would, you can start a command center. So this is the most standard way to play this matchup, okay? Like, even at high level, I would say. And now I can scan, see Arbiter is there. So Arbiter is starting, so I can start adding some recall defense. Just drop mines if you can. And if you have the APM, just bring more vultures here. This should die, I think. If not, our other vultures are gonna get it. That was pretty unfortunate, as it were. And you can start, killing the probes is more important than killing the Nexus, because obviously the probes can be relocated and still mined. Whereas, you know, you can't really, killing a Nexus doesn't really reduce their economy that much. So now we can, this is really mostly where your APM goes to. And now as you have more resources, you can add more factories and, you know, just start putting turrets everywhere basically. Just spam turrets as much as you can. Looks like my opponent might be trying to go for a bust, but, you know, as long as you macro correctly and don't overcommit the vultures out on the map, you should be fine. You can scan here, so you see, this is how vultures basically pick apart Protosses, especially if they're not as experienced, you know. Now we can finish killing that Nexus. And we're just making a fuck ton of units. You see how I have this command center? I'm not even going to use it right away. Okay, I'm just going to take my time. Just put down... kill this. Just put down recall defense, okay? And for recall defense, just put mines in your main. It doesn't really matter where you put them. Every mine you have is just going to be valuable, but for the most part, well, okay, we're getting busted here. So just bring all your units. Siege everything up. Make sure you're making units. Scan. If you can. Target fire these. Unfortunately, we're getting smurfed for some reason, like, so I kind of have to try harder. But I won't. If we lose, we lose. Whatever. I'm gonna try and get these probes. See, I have a bunch of vessels. You don't want to stop making vessels, to be honest. Just lay mines. We want to try and kill the probes. And while our opponent's dealing with these vultures, we're going to take this base at the bottom. And see, this is why it's really good to pull the Protoss out of position. And just focus fire these probes down. Even if you're amassing money, it's more important to, you know, make sure you get use out of your vultures right now. At this point, you can also shift F keys to factories. And notice what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like running vultures around. I forgot to get my upgrades, by the way. I'm running vultures around while I just build up my tank count. Slowly but surely. And queue up a bunch of vultures. And, you know, if you make enough SCVs, you don't really have to worry about making too many more SCVs. In my opinion, I'm a bit light on SCVs right now, but, you know, that's fine. And this is why this matchup's really just insanely hard, is it's really hard to play with very low APM, or like if you play slowly, it's just so hard to play. See, like, I'm just kind of sandbagging, and I don't want to get... Okay, let's try and defend this base. Okay, and now we're gonna go run vultures out on the map again. And then at some point, I'm gonna just... Basically, like, once you have around 2 control groups of tanks, you can just go A-move the Protoss. But I'm gonna pull his army away, and... While I pull... What the... So right now, while I pull my opponent's army away, I'm gonna push, basically. Just make sure all my tanks are hotkeyed. And we're just gonna go to his natural. And just make sure you kind of macro as well as you can. EMP as well as you can. I forgot my Goliath range, but it's okay. And then we come in here. You can siege. One thing you have to get really good at is sieging like on screen instead of through your control groups, because you really have, like, as you get better, you really have to have like good management like that. Like, I rarely kind of like siege with, what's it called? I rarely siege with my hotkeys. Although, not rarely, I wouldn't say rarely, but you know, as you get better, you start sieging like on screen, if that makes sense. Three CC, how many factories? Alright, I mean, it depends. It depends. These, like, it used to be the case, especially, if you have triple gas, triple gas, like 3 base triple gas. It used to be the case that you would just go up to like 9 factories right away. But on maps where you basically have like mineral only expansions, and because the meta has drifted towards kind of like 3-2 late game play rather than optimizing for the 2-1 push, generally the factory count's a bit more dynamic. And I would say you go up, like, you know, you're on this 3 factory count, and then you go up to like 5, 6, 7 sometimes, even before you land your 3rd base. But if you can get to 3rd base like this, going up from 3 fact to like 6 fact to like 4th command center to like 10 fact is pretty much how you would want to play. But it's difficult to manage because you only have 2 geysers and you need to get 3-2 upgrades, vessels, EMP, and a bunch of factories. So also harass style from P, much more common with storm drops. Yeah, so it depends also like how hard the Protoss is pressuring you. Like sometimes when you expand very slowly as Terran, you're actually better off staying on a lower factory count because it just saves you resources. And you're not, by the time you expand, sometimes you basically mine out your main base, and your natural's also kind of running low. Well, mostly your main base is really close to mining out, and when your main base mines out, then you won't have the income to kind of produce out of, like, let's say 10 factories. So it's not so clear and cut anymore where it's like, well, you just get up to 3 base and build like 10 factories or whatever. So it's really like a management thing. But I think if you just think of it, I mean, it just takes a lot of practice to figure it out. But yeah, this opening can be really, there's so many things that go in the opening. There's so many minute details that you have to keep track of to know exactly, do I need 3 Marines? Do I need an SCV with this? Do I need a bunker? Do I need to start a 4th Marine? Do I need a Vulture? Can I get a add-on? Should I get my depot or not? Generally, I would say the rule of thumb against any Protoss opening is if they open with a Zealot, you should just get a 3rd depot no matter what. I think for the most part, unless you scout them first and you see Zealot, like first try, like in this situation, if I saw a Zealot, I could just stay on 2 Marine, put down a bunker, make a 3rd Marine, and I would easily be able to get this command center before my 3rd depot. But you know, if you're second scouting a Zealot, you usually don't have time to get a bunker. And there was a time where Flash was doing, like, you know, when the whole N Scout thing came out, so N Scout is when you, because it's very popular, and I guess I might as well get into some of the meta stuff since we're getting closer to that skill level. So N Scout basically means the N Scout, like, you know, I called it N Scout because sometimes on the map it looks like an N, but the idea is to just scout the adjacent bases as Terran in a 4-player map. So you scout, so in my case I would scout this base and then this base, or this base and this base. If you spawn here, you scout this base and so on. And there were two main ideas behind this. One, well, the actual main idea, in my opinion, is that you're really mostly scouting for Nexus first, because you can only really bust Nexus first on adjacent positions. When Protoss goes cross map Nexus first, it almost is like the rush distances on most maps is just too high. But also you actually have a lot more counterplay on cross map, because when you have more space yourself as Terran, you can kind of pressure more with vultures and stuff like that. So you really don't want to be all in, or you don't want to be like busting a Nexus cross map most of the time. But on adjacent spawns, you definitely want to. But also, Flash was basically like also saying back when, you know, he was, I don't know who actually was the pioneer of this whole idea, but by cross scouting at certain times, you can kind of catch a Zealot as well. So like if your opponent is cross spawn and you scout here then there, generally the SCV can catch zealots in the middle of the map, and that can give you extra information as to whether or not you want to get a bunker. But Flash was basically playing bunker expand for the most part, or like a lot of the Terrans at the time were playing bunker expand, like no matter what. And over time, Terrans have started kind of playing just this kind of 3 Marine style instead, because you don't need to get a bunker. You can stop Dragoons with 3 Marines, and you can also get the Vulture as well to stop Goon Zealot probe with like 3 Marine SCV and Vulture with good micro. And then instead you can just kind of get your 3rd depot if you're getting pressured by a Zealot. And the reason you want to get a 3rd depot, even if it's just like an economic like 1 Zealot opening, because there's definitely different openings Protoss does. Like sometimes it's 1 Zealot, sometimes it's 2 Zealots, sometimes it's 3 Zealots. And obviously with 2-3 Zealot openings, you kind of want to basically get a depot. I mean, it makes a lot of sense because they're putting a lot of pressure. But even against 1 Zealot opening, it's good to get a depot, because for the most part you want to get up to like 4 Marines to be safe. Or like you want to get up to like 4 Marines. You just want to keep making Marines for a bit. And generally that means that by the time you put down this expansion, you actually start getting supply blocked, and you can make an SCV if you get like Marine Vulture. So even if you can get this command center before your 3rd depot safely, you end up supply blocked. So it's actually better to just get a 3rd depot even against like an economic opener. It just like smooths, like it makes the build smoother. You kind of don't want to sacrifice continuous SCV production for a faster command center, because it's just not as efficient, not as optimal. But yeah, when you scout the Protoss, really you just want to see, the biggest thing is look for a Zealot. And then the second biggest thing is to look for range, because, you know, as you get better as well, some Protosses cut range to get this Nexus. And that means that you kind of don't want to get a bunker, because the Protoss isn't going to be pressuring you either anyway without range. And you want to kind of put some counter pressure on yourself, because, you know, it is kind of greedy to not get range. And you have some openings, like some ideas you can use as Terran. So Zealot range, and then the other part is also if they're not getting range, you know, a lot of the times at lower levels, it just means that they're going to be making like a Citadel or a Robotics off 1 base. So in which case you need an eBay. And I would say if you don't get the scouting information, generally, you would start your eBay around now. So you start this tank, you have bunker depot as well, make SCVs, and when you have resources, which is basically now, right? Like now I would put down my eBay, and it's pretty much almost every game would be 415. I would put down my eBay if I don't get this rescout. Okay, but because I got this rescout, and because I know it's like, you know, a couple goons with range and robotics, so very obviously an observer build, I just chose not to get an eBay. But in which case, like right now I should be getting an armory, so that's usually how I play. But if you just queue up 2nd tank plus mines and then get your armory later and make sure your build is smooth, that's totally fine. And then get armory eBay. So I would say probably if you want to play kind of close to meta, you should start, you should just think about it these 2 ways. Is one, if you don't rescout, just go eBay armory, so eBay 415, and then like armory around whatever, I don't know, like 5 minutes in or something, 5:25 usually, 5 minutes, 5 to 5:25 or something, in between 5 and 5:30. Or if you do rescout and you know, like you confirm range, specifically if you confirm range is the biggest thing, you don't need turrets as fast, so you can go armory eBay instead, and your armory would basically be built at the time now, like for like really early on. But yeah, that's kind of like also very esoteric stuff, which I don't know why I spent so much time on explaining that opener, because I don't think it's that important. And I can go even more in depth, because like, you know, for example, if you start your armory earlier, you have to get your starport before your 2nd factory, whereas if you start your armory later, you can get a 3rd factory before your starport, which means you can play more aggressively with vultures, blah, blah, blah. And then some, oh yeah, and then the eBay Academy thing. I think for the most part, you guys should just stick to making eBays no matter what. Yeah, I think maybe the Academy stuff I can go into later. Let's see what the people are saying. In the chat. Armory with Academy is still okay versus build. The thing is, Armory and Academy, like Academy so there, I mean, there's a couple ways of like conceptualizing TVP infrastructure. The main problem Terran has in early game versus Protoss is, well, the main issue is detection, because DT straight up win the game. So you have to solve that problem, whether it's by confirming the Protoss's tech or by accounting it within your build. The other problem is also shuttle harassment, because Reavers are incredibly powerful as well. So you have to essentially have an answer to both of those things. Now, people use the conceptual, like there are two ways you can think about it. One, you just get turrets. And obviously that solves kind of both your problems, because they detect and they hit the shuttles. Or you can play another way and go Academy Armory, in which case you'll have Goliaths. You can make Goliaths to hit the shuttles, but you can also get scanners to scan for detection. So like conceptually it makes sense, right? Conceptually it's there. You have the counter to both. Now in terms of actually integrating it in a build that is optimal, Academy Armory is just incredibly hard to play. It's much more conditional, and the big thing is it leaves you with very little, like significantly lower SCV count, because you have to understand the Academy is more expensive than the eBay, and I mean ComSats cut into your economy heavily, because ComSats basically on top of costing 100 minerals, 100 gas total between the two of them, they also prevent you, like they also cost 4 SCVs, because you're not producing out of your command center. So it's actually a hugely steep cost, whereas the eBay, sure, the eBay is 125, which is already cheaper than the Academy, but then that 25 plus the 100 minerals you get, you save, means like 125, right? Which is basically 2 turrets, right? And you basically get 3 turrets, so it's not that much more expensive, but you also don't cut into your SCV production, which is the big thing. And so, although Academy Armory is nice because it gives you quite a lot of initiative, and you want to get an Academy eventually, because as Terran you kind of need to scan to confirm what the Protoss is doing in the mid game, whether they're going basically you have to confirm what they're doing, specifically in case they're going carriers, because carriers necessitates you playing in a vastly different way than the other types of Protoss, like that you have to go for timing. So you need to get your scanners eventually anyway, so it is nice to get the Academy earlier, because it kind of accelerates your infrastructure. You don't have to get it later. And then if you can get away with not making the eBay turrets in the long term, it's obviously better in a sense, because you get everything else faster. But in terms of like actually making it work, it's very difficult, because it's just very expensive. And then it's just very expensive to play Academy Armory. So, and it's not that much better than just building turrets. So in my opinion, you guys should stay away from making turrets. When would you turret ring versus 3 turrets? You basically would never want a turret ring. Never turret ring. It's bad. Just always make 3 turrets. You can make more turrets as you like. The only time you would want to make a turret, like a turret ring, basically, is if the Protoss is like all-inning you on one base, and you're like you expanded and you either held and there's like a follow-up robotics, or you're defending currently versus an all-in. That's when you can kind of like exaggerate on spending resources on the turrets. But if you're playing like a standard game, like a normal game, and you're both on equal footing, you really don't want to invest too much into turrets because it slows your build down, and you really don't need to. But you have to make sure you never place turrets out, and like if you're using a 3 turret setup or whatever, you don't 3 or 4 turrets basically maximum. You don't want to place your turrets out in the perimeter around your base. Even if you let the shuttle, even if you give Protoss more space with the shuttle, the reality is, if they're going DT drop, they just insta win. So if you don't have a turret by your command centers, they just insta win with DTs. So even if you give them more space to the Reaver, you can kind of counteract that by playing with tanks and siege by your turret. Then they can't really drop, and then you can put mines inside your base, etc., etc., etc. But you really need that turret. You need turrets to function as both anti-air and detection. But yeah, anyway, I'm kind of like getting way too much into this. Although I guess it's important, but yeah. I think if you guys play eBay, I'll try and just stick to eBay to show you guys, because I mean, I should out of principle, but you can't really go wrong with playing with an eBay. And our opponent this game, honestly, was quite decent for C rank. I suspect this was not a C ranker, but what do I know? I don't know how good players are at C rank. But this is pretty much like a solid build from our opponent. And yeah, this eBay should be a bit faster. But I mean, it's okay. The reason I built this command center was because I knew my opponent was going for an arbiter. Basically, you only ever want to expand on location if your opponent is playing some kind of very standard like observer into arbiter build, okay? But if there's any kind of shuttle involved whatsoever, or like any kind of delayed tech, like no Stargate basically, like slower Stargate, you never want to take your expansion on location. Just always take it in your base. Always build it in your base, okay? But if you know for a fact that your opponent's playing like standard like this, just always put down your command center at your third. And then, like I said, this is usually how I progress. You know, we got 5 factories, 6th as well. And you know, there's a point where as you get better, you don't really stick to these like paradigms, like these build order paradigms. You kind of start understanding the flow of the game more intuitively, and you start understanding that you just need to make production to spend your money. It's kind of like you kind of start understanding the game more as like a sport, where it's like it's not so much strategy, it's a lot just kind of like if you were to use an analogy with like tennis, you kind of want to hit the ball just hit the ball better than your opponent or something. And that kind of is the same. There's the same feeling in StarCraft. Like you just kind of have to make your build work better than your opponent's, because it's never gonna be there's always gonna be micro adjustments being made between both players and stuff. You know, it's not a single player game where you can like always do the same thing over and over, you know. So like for example, my opponent has to deal with my vulture harass. I have to deal with the fact that my opponent's trying to take a super greedy third, and so I have to, you know, like of course your money is going to go up as you're controlling other stuff, you know. It's impossible to have like a perfect setup. So you know, the idea is to just add a couple more factories, because you know 5 factories is a bit light, and then eventually I will take this base. And this is how this matchup is played always. But notice, like, this is pretty much all you do as Terran, is just run around with vultures as you build up your army. You want to get some recall defense at some point, and try not to get busted. There's so many things we could do better this game. For example, like here I have this eBay and this Rax. I mean, this Rax is spawning here, which is nice, but this eBay could be here. Could have a couple more turrets, could have depots as well, could have definitely way more mines. You know, when my vultures kind of died, they all had so many mines. So, and these units were AFK, so we can conceivably play faster to try and put more mines down. And so, you know, in your own games, you should kind of look at your game, like at your replays, and think like this, right? Like, hey, what could I have done better? Why am I floating this many resources? And, you know, sometimes, like, it's not always justified being hypercritical like that, because there's no one, even pros don't have perfect macro. Like, they don't have, like, god tier macro. Like, even pros will get their resources up and prioritize. Like, there's not just macro. I think this is the easiest thing to look at, your resources, and be like, oh, am I playing well? Am I not playing well? And that's like a super huge trap, because there's so much more going on in the game other than you spending your money. But it is important to spend your money, specifically with respect to like just hitting timings, because you don't want to fall behind on timings too much. But whenever you like sacrifice some of your resource spending, for example, to kill what basically would basically slow down your opponent, then you're getting a trade-off, right? Then suddenly you're not really slowing yourself down, because your opponent is slowed down proportionally to you doing the damage, right? So like, I would rather put in some resources to snipe probes than to continue my build order, because this will probably slow down my opponent more than it would slow down my build order, you see. But like, that's not always true. But yeah, this game, basically all I did was sit here and waited for 2 control groups of tanks. Just wait for 2 control groups of tanks, and then you can attack. Your upgrades don't really matter. Wait for 2 control groups of tanks, try and get to like 180 supply, and then attack. That's really what my plan was this game. And until I did that, I just ran around the vultures, try and create havoc and stuff. Okay, I mean, I'll just put my chat box on. I should have probably put the chat on this whole time, but I'll just read some of these questions. Not overmake SCVs and probes, but I realized. Yeah, I mean, I think as Protoss, it's a bit harder. You kind of have to. It's easier to overmake workers, but I think just look into like, if you have a tendency to overmake workers, just look at a couple of your replays in a row, and just like look at the time where you reach a certain worker count and do that and try and average it out, and then just tell yourself, okay, like at this time I will stop making workers. Like, it's Are you guys actually saying that Fortnite is like, who cares about APM, guys? APM is it's such a contrived notion. It's so stupid. It's like such a stupid notion. And you can't just, like, people that compare APM to fucking, like, you can't use it as this, like, what is it in math? Like, you can't just take the normative thing. What's that, like, absolute number of it, like the absolute APM, like just strictly speaking, like, oh, you're inputting 300 APM, this person's inputting 300 APM, therefore it's the same. Like, who can, it's so stupid. It just means nothing, guys. Five 7 facts for 2 base. What about for 3 base? Yeah, I definitely covered that earlier. For 3 base, you want to have... yeah, I'm not going to repeat myself, man. You can watch the VOD. You don't really want to go over 10, 11, 12 factories, but I'm not going to like get into it. Okay, I'm just going to use the bathroom real quick, and then we can queue more games. You know, my chat literally just is absolutely trolling. Like, guys, whatever. Oh, and the other thing is, you know, I'm being very, like, what's it called? Very accurate with some of the information I was giving you guys with respect to, for example, like, how to adjust your builders and stuff. You don't need to be that accurate, okay? So for example, in TVP, if you want to make sure you never die, you can open in a certain way, right? Like I could show you guys probably openings that are less decision making based. But I'm not gonna lie, I am just too lazy to come up with like something like that, and to like I'm just too lazy, guys, to teach you that. So I'll just tell you guys my decision making, and then you can maybe derive your own ideas. So for example, when I told you guys, you know, when the Protoss pressure is hard, it's okay to make a third depot and delay your command center. Well, you can take that as, well, if I want to be, and like, you know, build a bunker, then you can take that as, well, if I want to be safe in all circumstances, regardless of what I'm scouting, then I could just go 3 depot bunker. And, you know, at sea level, that'll work. Like, that doesn't put you too far behind to, like, lose, I don't think. But I also don't care too much about figuring out whether that's the case or not. Like, I don't know at what level you need to really be accurate with your stuff, so. But yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna keep queuing. My chat's just talking about like MOBAs or some shit in APM, just like. If APM wasn't important, then RTSs would be the most popular games ever. Instead, MOBAs exist. What? I don't know why you guys keep talking about APM, man. Like, that's such a fucking just such a stupid topic, man. Yeah, you guys have, if you think it's important, you just have no idea what you're talking about. You have such a, like, it's such a potato, like, primitive conception of stuff. Like, literally, just stop thinking about APM, guys. It's literally pointless. It's such a pointless metric. It's so bad. Just try and, the most important thing is to try and execute everything you need to execute. It doesn't matter what your APM is. Anyway, so we're against random on Eclipse. Now, random's obviously pretty weak on 2-player maps because you can scout them instantly. So I'm just gonna open it with a gas. I mentioned this, I think, in a previous episode, I suppose. But you can open gas and just go Goliath build against Zerg if you want. But on this 2-player map, because it's random and 2-player, I can scout really early, and I can cancel my gas in case it's Zerg. So I'm gonna do something like 12 scout, 13 gas to make sure I have time to cancel my gas if it's Zerg. And then I'll just play normal bio against it. Okay, so that's my plan. And that catches everything. Like, basically, random has absolutely no advantage on this map versus Terra. Also, I hope through this series, maybe you guys can gain an appreciation a bit more. And I'm not explaining everything. There's a lot of stuff that is like, So there's a lot of stuff that's still under the hood, so to speak, in terms of decision making that's going on. So, but hopefully you guys get a bit more of an appreciation of just like the type of decision making you're making in this game. You know, for example, I'm building my racks here because in case it's Protoss, I still want to have some type of SimCity. And the reason why you'd rather do something like 12 scout, 13 gas rather than, I don't know, like 12 gas, 12 scout as well, is because now I'm compensating for some of the lost minerals that I'm incurring scouting this early and taking my gas. So if I would take my gas like I would normally take it, although see, this isn't even fast enough, but I don't see an overlord, and nothing else, so for sure this is most likely not zerg. So probably in the next time I play, I would scout even earlier, okay? Probably 11 scout or something, because this time I learned that my SCV doesn't get there fast enough for me to cancel my factory cancel my fucking gas in case my opponent is zerg. But anyway, my opponent's actually proxying a fucking factory, I think. So factory timing's around like 230, 235, 240, whatever, it depends. I mean, at higher level it's around 230, but my opponent just, I don't know what the fuck my opponent's doing with the scouting SCV, just absolute garbage. Everything about what my opponent is doing is awful right now. Like, the timings are all off. I have no idea. I'm assuming this is not a proxy factory. If it is, it's like the worst proxy factory ever. But I can just play this way no matter what. Actually, because my opponent is basically... I'm just so confused, man. I think my opponent's just bad. Mining. So my opponent's still mining. So generally, if you're expanding this matchup, you stop mining gas. Okay. Well, this is certainly annoying. I'll try and save this. Make tank. So if you want to play safely in this matchup, you should always open with the tank. And then I'm gonna make a bunker as well, and bring my rack. So this is one tiny detail that you might as well learn, or like sooner rather than later. But if you're expanding versus like kind of one base all in, you don't need to scout their base with your racks. You need the racks at your base to like spot for your tanks if they do something like some kind of tank bust. But my opponent's actually just gonna expand behind this with 2 factory. So I'm just gonna rally this tank across the map and make my own factory. And the idea here is that mines shouldn't finish in time, especially considering he went Vulture add-on, I think. And this is going to put on a lot of pressure. And behind this, I'm just going to have 2 factory Vulture production. I'm going to get speed as well for my Vultures, because I'm playing versus Vultures. And I'll get a 3rd factory. I'm just going to transition, I'll transpose this into a 3 factory. Okay, no more at all. Dude, this guy's a fucking legend, man. Okay, so I misread this build totally. I guess well, I suppose that expansion is much slower than I anticipated. So this was actually 2 Vulture speed before expansion, which is very special build. Very special build indeed. but I'll still contest my opponent's vulture production because I think I can. Because my expansion is faster. So I should have more resources. But my opponent's just gonna build, or my opponent's just going to mine. So even if I get a map, I can't end the game with just pure vulture, right? So I gotta make sure I focus mines. That's the most important part. And then my opponent just potatoed so hard. So because I can't end with pure vulture, the big thing is just to make sure I'm still producing SCVs. And I'm still making tanks, because they're still important in this matchup. So this is the kind of like the decision making I'm employing here to make the units that I'm making is kind of purely feel based. It's hard to really explain on the fly, like why am I making vultures, why am I still making tanks off of this, but it's just kind of like a mental image I have of how I think I should play this situation, like the matchup. So and you can kind of see now that my production is kind of overtaking my opponents. You can get siege as well. It's just important to get your upgrades. Sometimes you like get overly greedy and don't get your siege mode or whatever, and then all of a sudden you need siege but you don't have it. My opponent's gonna siege up here, and that's fine. Now I know that there are definitely mines outside my base, so I'm gonna wait until I get scans. And I'm gonna use my own vultures to just mine up the map. I can start my command center earlier, and then just, you know, lift it and take my expansion. I'll make 2 Goliaths here, and the only reason I'm making these Goliaths, okay, my opponent is quite honestly playing like a complete fucking psycho, but it's okay because my opponent's build is basically just not optimal. You see how, you know, he's not even mining from that base. And now I have scan, I can go out, get all these mines. Just make sure that my vultures are here preventing mining. Scan for more mines. That's really annoying actually. Now I have to repair all of this. I have my Goliaths here, go kill this. Well, whatever, I'm just gonna play this out. My opponent's not really getting any value from that expansion anyway. And, okay, what are the other principles that I'm using here? You kind of want to get a starport. So, all of this you need to have infrastructure. Armory Academy starport. Generally, if you stay on 4 fact, that's like the magic number. Now I'm gonna just sit back and expand myself. The other part is you want to make sure you're always making workers, always in this matchup. You really want to stop kind of very late. You can bring this Rax back. And I'm just going to take a nice defensive position. There are different ways you can play. I mean, I'm just like a very macro gamer. And I like to play for bases, so I'm just going to take these defensive positions, even though like probably I could be able to reach out here and take that. I'd rather just kind of make sure my expansion's online and just get my macro going. You see how my opponent's running through the middle with a bunch of vultures? It would be hard for me to defend these vultures if I had just pushed out, you know? And then suddenly my third base would be compromised and it would just be really hard to play. But instead, I'm just gonna sit back, take my expansions, mine up all the paths to make sure I have good spotting. I'll get an eBay as well. I can start scanning my opponent's base. You know, the starport is starting, but not quite there for my opponent, so I know that they can't possibly have like drops just yet. And I am up to 3 base, so I'm gonna have 3 add-ons for now. Once I start my upgrades, I can go up to 4 add-ons. Take this fight because I'm on high ground, so I'll trade pretty well. Just make sure I'm spending money, you know, just spending all the money. Take my time to take my expansion here. I'm gonna expand soon. This here is also kind of secure, basically. I should get a couple more mines at this location. And now I'm just kind of progressing my build, like just very in a very standard way. Like it's just, this is how you play. This is how you play this matchup. Okay. And now I'm also going to start drops. And just make sure you have good macro, that's really it. I'm not really paying too much attention to what my opponent is doing. It's more just making sure I'm hitting my builds. You know, still taking decent trades here and there. Can scan, just make sure my opponent isn't doing anything crazy. These guys are there from repairing my tanks earlier on. You hate when that happens. That's why you have to always scan where you're going with your units. But now that I saw that from my opponent, I can maybe try and play a bit more aggressively. So now that I kind of have my infrastructure a bit more settled, like I have my starport, I have my upgrades going, I have my bases coming. I'm gonna go up to 8 factories, and I will get a 4th add-on. If I could build my 4th add-on now, I would, but I can't just yet, so. I'm gonna siege up, try and see if I can pressure here, because I know my opponent lost a lot of tanks. I'm just being very, like, slow and meticulous. And I should also start my Goliath upgrades because, you know, my opponent can very easily have wraiths or something like that. And now I take this position. It's very hard for my opponent to take another base. These vultures can go down. And this is where maybe I'm definitely overplaying my skill, you know, or the skill level I'm at. I'm just spending my money as it comes in. That's why I'm taking that expansion. I just have so much money, and I'm switching to FKs. Make sure you always focus fire tanks if you can. Bring these units up here. So when you're ahead in tempo in this matchup, so I think the other time, I don't know if it was I was streaming or whatever, but I was talking about how for the most part, you take positions in TVT, and then your reinforcements take new positions. So you have to kind of think about it as playing Go. You know, you don't want to reposition too much. You kind of just bring new units to the table all the time. But when you're in like kind of ahead, like in an advantageous position, you're really kind of just using your reinforcements to reinforce like key positions. So right now, okay, I kind of definitely slowed my opponent down enough. Now I'm just gonna take my base and just chill. I'm gonna take this extra base here and just chill. But this is very like, very standard like, what's it called? Eclipse. Okay, it's very standard what I'm doing here for this map. And generally, when you get into this layer stage, vultures, right now vultures are kind of worthless. Like they don't really do too much, right? They can't really exert too much map control because the map's basically already been split. That's why sometimes you see on this map, I've seen some pros like really rush battlecruisers because you can split this map so easily. My opponent looks like he's gonna try and bust here, but I will show you guys that it is not possible to bust, especially once you have +2 upgrades. But when you have like mines and tanks, it's just so, and like high ground, it's just so hard to bust up against that. And behind that, I'm slowly just building my dropship camp. I can also, if I had X-Ray PM, I could definitely take that position with these units here, but I don't want to try too hard. But right now, just think about that I can definitely take that position. Actually, now that I have everything kind of secured, I'll make an eBay here to just float it. Now that I have everything secured, I'm actually going to try and take that position with my units. Although now my opponent's kind of coming here with vultures. I'm just going to try and expand to the bottom here, okay? While I'm still making dropships. Around this time I can also make a third armory to start getting air upgrades, because once you get 3-2, you kind of still want to get that plating upgrade, but then you can start getting air weapons and air plating, in which case you would have your ground plating and the double upgrades going, so you need 3 armories basically, okay? So I'm going to kill this off, so I can take this expansion here. We can scan as well, you know, see what's up. My opponent's making wraiths, so we can definitely make sure that, I don't know, we have turrets or something, and we have Goliaths making. My opponent doesn't have this position, so I'm gonna siege a couple tanks here. Just unhotkey them real quick. And I'm gonna take this position. And now that I have a bunch of money, I'm just gonna make starports. And just think about that late game air transition. Okay, my opponent, I don't know where my opponent is going. My opponent's just, you know. I'm gonna take this position now because it's given to me. I actually wonder if my opponent has +2. Ooh, my opponent has good upgrades. And now that we've kind of stabilized the map, there's not much more ground to be taken. I can start loading up these drops and just play just straight through these drops right here. Take this one as well, I don't know which one. And where do these drops go? I mean anywhere really. We're so far ahead it doesn't really matter too much. These can come here. Well, I'm just gonna bring my drops to defend that. And here we can start making control towers, hopefully. Just drop on top of this. I don't really need to. I'm just gonna chill my drops on over my opponent's army. And honestly, at this point, there's nowhere I can try and drop that. The wraiths are coming. There's only 2 wraiths. I'm gonna try and drop this base here and kind of move through the middle. And that's it. So, to be honest, that was kind of, I mean, I was definitely not playing, like, super hard there, but, yeah, there's a massive gap, right? I mean, at this point, it's kind of obvious that I'm not trying to dumb down my play too much. But my opponent actually, for being a random player, played TVT quite well, so I don't know if they're a Terran player or what. This factory was so insanely late, I was actually confused. But I think if I was playing like super tightly, I would have processed what was going on. I mean, this to me looks like a proxy factory any time, any day of the week. But so like honestly, basically what would happen so you know, a lot of you guys probably have this. So this is kind of a common idea or common thought that circulates in like RTS gamers' brains, but and I guess the most common articulation of this is when Artosis is like, I always play fucking idiots. I can't play against idiots because you can't tell what they're doing. And this is an instance of it. Like, from my scouting information, I legitimately thought that my opponent was, I mean, they were missing a building. Like, this was just straight up like suboptimal play. I legitimately thought my opponent was gonna like proxy, like do a proxy or something like that, or it was proxying the factory or something like that. Although I had a hunch that I think it was just the build was off, but I can't tell, right? I can't tell. But you shouldn't worry too much about that, because see, like here, I don't even see a second depot. Like, it's just impossible for me. I mean, I see this second marine making, and that should be already a tell. Like, you can't really afford, like, if you're going like 10 factory or something and you're already proxying your factory, you can't, I mean, can't really, and it seems like this marine timing is kind of similar to mine. So really, if you look at the entirety of the information, you can probably piece together that even if it is a proxy factory, it's timed out with my own factory. So I don't really have to adjust my build order too much, but I do have to check, you know. But basically in TVT, like, the whole idea is that even if you can't tell what your opponent is doing, like this, just play in a safe way. Like, you don't have to definitely, it's not about over exaggerating your defense. Like, I'm still gonna take an expansion normally. Like, there's this concept where you have to force your opponent to pressure you into deviating your build order rather than kind of like spook yourself out. So I think a lot of players in this position might be like, oh, I can't see if there's a factory, I can't see if there's a proxy factory or whatever, and then they would just completely veer off of expanding, when, you know, in reality my opponent's just potato, and suddenly I'm all inning because I'm not expanding. I'm making a second factory because I think my opponent's proxying, and my opponent's just kind of taking their own base. And, you know, I've seen, you know, I think this has happened on the Tosa stream quite a bit, where he misreads something and then over exaggerates the response. You have to force your opponent to basically pressure you into not expanding, okay, or pressure you off of your standard build order. And so here I just played confidently anyway. I played normally. Now, this was just so hard to spot everything that my opponent did, actually, and it's kind of annoying. But even in this case, I probably could have just canceled my command center and just placed it on high ground. Like, the optimal response here, probably for me anyway, wasn't even to like pull my SCVs, but just be like, okay, my opponent, basically when they invest in 3 marines like that, they're automatically going to have a 3rd depot no matter what. And the bunker is also a huge investment. 3rd depot plus bunker is like huge. It's a lot of resources. They're not going to have their command center anytime soon, but they're also not going to have a second factory follow-up anytime soon. So you can be just content with being like, okay, that's the case. I'm just going to build an add-on, start my tanks. My tank is going to start killing the bunker, and I'm going to have a command center, and I'm just going to progress my build. So at the highest level, basically, this is what players, like pro gamer level players, can do, is they can transpose any situation back on track into normalcy, and they can kind of like see the give and take. So even a pro gamer could do something like what my opponent did, not in like kind of retarding their build, as it were. Like, I don't know, I think that's actually the best expression, like literally delaying their build on purpose. But they could go for something like, I'm just gonna make more marines and pressure really early and kind of hide my buildings, in which case you know, they would know that they would force at least their opponent to go command center at the high ground and like slow their build down. So anyway, you can transpose a lot of these situations back into a normalcy, is what I'm trying to get at. And that would have been definitely the better, more stable course of action. But because I'm playing at like this level and I'm not, you know, I'm not like trying too hard, I definitely did like kind of more of an ego hold, I guess. But I think, in my opinion, it was not the correct way to hold this. Because, see, my command center barely started. Like, it's not that big of a deal to cancel this and to just start my command center at base. And then my opponent doesn't really have any follow-up. But I think I also scouted the 3 gas anyway. But as you get better... As you get better at the game, you also get better at transposing all these situations into normalcy, I would say. Or you get better at kind of like executing your build regardless of the circumstances and kind of forcing your opponent to execute their strategy to veer you off your build. So, like, yeah, I don't know how else to explain that. I think sometimes, like, for example, in TVZ, if you scout pull first, you might be tempted to just be like, oh, I'm just not going to expand. I'm going to go 2 racks or something. But you really shouldn't. You should stay on your plan to 2 racks, or to 1 racks expand into whatever 2 racks. But you should just know how to, like, tweak it a bit so that you can deal with the pull first situation, okay? And this, I kind of scouted poorly, but it doesn't really matter, because my opponent's build is just so potato. That's another thing, is as long as you're doing like as long as you understand what the optimal pattern of your build order is, then you will outplay people that kind of take shortcuts like this thing here, like double factory vultures into like expansion, into like whatever, like just none of it makes sense. And it's not even that much better. Like it actually is not even that much better having a command center earlier like this, because you're still lagging behind on other key infrastructure. So the way I'm progressing my build is like the most, like just the most solid way to do it. Yeah, and TVT, how to explain this? The early game is very tricky because, again, like vultures are the prime like map control unit in the early game, and like tanks are just not that strong. And I kind of explained this, I think maybe last time as well. But your tanks are really, it's kind of like you're kind of playing the way that Perlos plays against Terran as well, and in that they have to slow down their expansion patterns because, or their expansion taking, because they have to make sure that they can deal with vulture harass. But TVT is literally the same thing. And also mines just exert so much map control. Like you need scans. Like your map control is basically like clearing mines is gated on scans. So actually like these mines buy a certain amount of time, right? That is the time that it takes to kind of refill your energy, and you kind of have to always scan. Like there should be mines everywhere, like at your front, at your bases, in random paths, and you have to make sure that you're constantly scanning ahead to clear them, to not lose units. And you see pros are really good at that. They're always scanning ahead of their units, especially in the early mid game, to make sure that they don't lose any units to mines. But basically, yeah, like I kind of mentioned this earlier. I guess we'll go back into it. This game wasn't really a good example of it because my opponent kind of just did like whatever. But as a concept, like you really want to just get up to like 4 factories and then start expanding to your 3rd base, and then get up to 6 factories and like, you know, have your armory and your starports and stuff. And the academy armory is as well is very important infrastructure to have, because armory, I mean, obviously the armory allows you to make Goliaths, which allows you to deal with rates, but also it allows you to start your weapons upgrade. And then your academy also allows you to get your scanners, which are really important as well, versus cloak wraith or like versus mines. And you need to get these buildings at some point. And generally you get them like around when you have 2 or 3 factories, depends on the type of opening you're doing. And there's 3 different types of openings generally in like a normal game, but I think I could save that explanation for later, or if people will have questions at some point. Thanks for the Prime, by the way, names. Yeah, in this game, yeah, I mean, I just played like in a very standard way. And I don't know how to explain it without questions, basically. So, but this is basically how you play TVT. Just put mines down, and again, like, one of the things in TVT is it's very hard to attack, mostly because you give up so much map control, right? Like, if I attack here, then all of a sudden the space that I'm taking, and this is a concept that's true for every matchup, but it's very exacerbated in this particular matchup because units can be so stationary. One, because tanks are sieged, but two, because vultures can just exert so much map control running around and placing mines and counterattacking. So it's really important to play safe. But if I move this army here and then like kind of take a forward position, then all of a sudden this expansion that I'm taking is going to be compromised. And then sure, I can have this forward position that has like a nice advantage, but there's many games where your opponent's just going to counterattack you. Suddenly your third base isn't mining. This isn't really doing too much for you, and your opponent's stabilized their third base. So that's why a lot of the times you just want to play slower than you would think. Which is why I sat here, just took this, then had my reinforcements come secure this base, and only now do I transfer my SCVs. And again, see, this is the difference in. This is why, you know, a lot of players or a lot of veterans kind of recommend new players to practice SCV production, practice worker production, because like here, that's just pure mechanical difference. There's really nothing else about it, and it's just giving me a ridiculous advantage supply wise. So okay, we keep on going. Oh shit, Ninjubitancy, can you talk about general game plan and TVT? The win conditions to look at. Yeah, I'll try and do that next game, next TVT. So we're playing TVZ here. I'm gonna start playing like standard. I show you guys how to do the mech build, and don't worry about it. I think I kind of definitely zoomed past the earlier ranks, but hopefully I'll try and have different, you know, if there's a lot of people asking for it, I'll try and have different passes at like the lower ranks and like show you guys more like just like dumbed down gameplay, I guess. But for now, you know, I'm just gonna do this series, and then the next series I'll try and improve if there are better things to do. So we're playing versus Zerg. I'm going to show you guys just the standard way to play against Zerg without walling anything you need to wall or anything. And you can easily scale this. I mean, TVZ is probably the most like scalable matchup. TVZ is not. I mean, there's definitely concepts involved, but I would say it's not too heavy on concepts. I think for the most part, it's pretty straightforward to play. The build order is very linear. You can definitely do things to like adjust your build order here and there, and there's definitely decision making, but not as much as the other matchups in my opinion. I'm not sure, but it's very easy to scale it basically. So we're gonna do the standard just standard build order. My racks here was a bit late. Generally this rack goes down at like 125, 127, put it down at 130. All these numbers, they don't mean too much, guys, but you know, it's nice to know, because you know there's gonna be that 1 in 100 games where the slightly faster racks allows you to defend like a 4 pool, or like, you know, a slightly faster wall allows you to repair it against a 9 pool or something like that. So you don't want to slack off too much on your timings, but you know, also don't get too stressed out if you don't hit them. So 14 scout, double scout. Double scout is really for, that's unfortunate. I'm just gonna leave this game then. I'm not gonna waste time trying to kill the zerg. So double scout is important in that matchup because you want to catch pool first openings, because basically you can't put your command center down at your natural against pool first. Okay, apparently you're gonna get a Protoss instead. Yeah, you'll never know what to do. Oh, and yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask like, why are you playing Korean? Why don't, okay, so two things. This F5 trick, okay, when you press F5, it reverts back to standard, like the low resolution, whatever, the original graphics, let's say. The reason I do this, twofold, I guess, before a game starts, is one, it centers the camera on top of your command center, but also two, you can, if you spam click in the dark, like when the screen is black, and make an SCV, you can make it like earlier than normal, but it doesn't really change too much, guys. Okay, it's not that big of a deal, but there is some practicality to it. The other thing is, I get asked a lot, like, you know, why am I playing in Korean? And it's just because I like it. I just like the sounds. That's it. Okay, there's no practicality to it, so it's not giving me an advantage or anything. Okay. So I'll show you guys different. It'll allow me to practice this opening a bit too, because I don't really use it too much anymore. But this is Fighting Spirit bottom right, and this has like a kind of a notorious, well, notorious, and like not in a bad way. It just has like a well-known wall here for Terran that, you know, even pros use from time to time. And it's this Rax factory wall, and basically you can kind of get away with like a siege expand without making any marines, and it's quite powerful, I would say. But you know, it's just so out of the meta that you know, Terran players don't really play like that anymore, but you can definitely use this, and you won't have to deal with zealot rushes at all. So 12 scout, or 12 gas, 13 scout, as always. The other thing I will say is my builds aren't really tight in this series. Like I spent a lot of, like, I kind of purposely, like I said, sandbag a bit, and also I spent a lot of time trying to explain stuff. So you know, they're not too tight, but they're okay. But just, if you guys want references on builds and you're at a higher level, definitely you should just watch pros. But, or, you know, maybe if you watch me, watch when I'm playing well and like trying hard as fuck. So let's see if I can remember how to do this. Yeah, I definitely do. So basically when you do this type of expansion, so I have this wall here. I don't really care if my opponent makes a zealot. I think maybe if they do make a zealot, I will make a marine, but not yet. I'm actually gonna wait until I can basically build a command center first. I might have to, we'll see how much harassment this probe does. Start my command center, then start mining gas. Of course, I'm actually absolutely brain dead, but I blocked my machine shop like an absolute brain let. Anyway, my opponent went 3 pylons. I can get one. It's just pointless. This marine literally does nothing for us. So we're gonna start tank and siege mode first, then get a depot, then get eBay. Now, I have a bunch of resources that aren't there. Actually, I'm gonna start my depot first, then get siege mode. So I don't even know this builder, guys. Like, I don't know it by heart. I'm just applying my opening principles here. I'm getting my depot first, now I'm getting siege mode. And then I'm gonna continuously make these, well, I'm gonna make an eBay first. And you'll notice I actually have, despite the fact that I canceled my command center, I have quite a lot of resources because I didn't have to make like marines or a bunker or anything. It's important to keep making tanks because basically you want to match the opponent's production off one gate, or else they can put on too much pressure. So repair that. And again, opening principles here. I'm gonna wait for siege to finish before I float my command center down. Just make sure I'm always making tanks. It's the most important. And we went eBay and we're gonna go armory. Okay. eBay armory, as always. Get this tank out. Now we can float because we have siege. We can build it and bring this racks to block as well, and just siege as well down here. And now transfer our SCVs. Probably put a small wall here. It doesn't matter where the racks is. It's just gonna kind of like fuck with the AI of the. Well, actually, this is not the best. I want to make sure it covers kind of more of the top area. Okay. And we're chilling. Doesn't really matter what the opponent's doing, by the way. Now I'm gonna get, well, not yet. So around like 610, you want to start your turrets. Just make sure you're making units non-stop. It's really quite important. I'm gonna make my second factory now because I kind of have to. So let's say after 4 tanks, 3 or 4 tanks, depends. Make sure you make your second factory. And it's just very, very standard way to play. And I'm gonna keep most of my tanks unsieged because in order to deal with shuttles, you need to basically have these units be mobile. So you can also make a Goliath here just to... The Goliath is there, even though I have turrets, the Goliath is there to deal with space that I don't quite control with my turrets. Make sure that the possible shuttle doesn't have too many entryways. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna start getting my vulture upgrades because they're pretty good to get. I got an academy off of 2 factories. Okay, kind of standard. Okay, my tanks are having a really good time. Most important is to make sure you're not missing SCVs. And now I can make an extra turret. We saw my opponent's kind of committed on, or my opponent has a shuttle. So, and generally, again, check my upgrades. Get my starport around now. You'll kind of get a feeling for when you have to start making your starport if you play a lot. If you think about it. And now I'm gonna make more factories as well. Just make units, sometimes like it doesn't... your builder doesn't matter too much. That's the one thing I will say, like I am playing very loose, like I am playing very much based off of my understanding of the game, so it's like I can make adjustments, whereas you guys probably can't. So like I can play, like, if I make too many units, then I can kind of perceive that and account for it. So I'll put on more pressure. But you guys probably should stick to like more of a builder, right? So finally I can scan, see what's up. My opponent, first thing that I check, core spinning, no. So I know that my opponent isn't, isn't going for carriers, so I can take a 3rd base. So that's what I'm gonna do. And get my second add-on. So my opponent's gonna play this like super aggressive style. We saw support Bay and Citadel, Templar, whatever. No, we didn't see Templars. But obviously my opponent's gonna play with probably a lot of drops. So we just have to take our time. Just have to take our time. And just, we can spam turrets in our base, and we can spam mines in our base. Get all your upgrades. These vultures are just gonna go around and, you know, just keep the Protoss honest, kind of. Make sure there's not, like, probes, like, transferring the middle of the map. Also, I'm gonna go check all the bases. And it's only, you know, I'm not overcommitting with these vultures. I'm just sending 2, right? I'm just gonna check all the bases. I'm gonna make a combination of Vulture, Goliath, tank. I just, basically against what Protoss is doing, you just want to have a lot of supply. Like, it doesn't really matter what that supply is, but you're gonna have to have a lot of supply to take your bases, okay? I'm gonna build a bunch of turrets. Again, notice how the biggest skill I have here is just making a fuck ton of workers, okay? And in TVP, as long as I make all my workers, I usually stop around like 11 minutes, I would say. So now I'm gonna put down kind of mines everywhere. I kind of have turrets everywhere. I can also leave 1 tank here. Because basically, when you push out to take your third base, is when generally they will like run into your base with a bunch of shuttles or some shit, okay? So we just want to make sure that we don't get countered. So I have a pretty decent setup, and now I can, this is like kind of like the same concept against Recall. Now I can just focus on taking my expansion without being too nervous. And now I'm also just gonna put down factories, because you can see my income's kind of skyrocketing even because of my SCV count. I can put down a couple of mines here, also probably take a turret here. Just move my army down here. You can scan ahead to see what's up. You don't have to be too, like, you know, whatever. This is C rank, so, you know, you don't have to be too clean here. Just make sure you're making depots. Did I transfer SCVs? Not from here. Take this base slowly. You can siege up a couple tanks and build turrets. Is my opponent gonna try to attack here? I don't know. Build more turrets. Yeah, my opponent's here now. Just bring everything down here. So this is good, because now when we know, you know, a second ago was kind of scary because I didn't really have information on my opponent and they could have been attacking my front door or something. So notice how, well, here I'm just going to make a fuck ton of factories because this is Fighting Spirit, we have a lot of gas. And now, I mean, this is where it's kind of hard. Like, what do? You know, like, do you wait for upgrades? Do you wait for a supply? So generally, I would say if you can get up to 180 supply off this situation, we can attack. Scan, see what's up. My opponent's going for Templar. Let's see if we can push out. No, not too safe to push out with these vultures, that is. But I will take this position first. Start my upgrades. Cut 1 tank to start this upgrade. Come here, make sure I'm mining this. Push out, siege these guys up so they can fucking shoot down the goons. And now, all of a sudden, like, we have this position, we can put a turret here. All of a sudden, it's very hard for my opponent to see when we move out with vultures. So we're probably getting deep storm drops here, try and dodge it. Definitely have not enough SCVs. Scan here to kill obs. Okay, no obs. Then I can go and move out with my vultures at least, while I get closer to max. Also, just make a command center if you can afford it. You can expand here, but generally expanding here is fine. Or expanding towards the middle is good too on this map. No, I definitely overcommitted with the. I definitely brought way too many vultures here. Because, you know, my opponent can definitely bust this. So on Fighting Spirit, you can definitely take the middle of the map as Terran. And that's what we'll do. Just come here, comfortably defend. Try and focus the Templar. Holy shit, our opponent's fucking god mode. Wait, am I getting fucking rocked by the Serum? This guy's got like crazy macro. Well, we're dead, guys. There's so many Smurfs in this dumb fucking game, man. I feel bad, dude. You guys have to learn how to play in these conditions. I'm just kidding. I can't tell if this guy's Smurf or not. Oh my god. Never mind, he's not a Smurf. He's just Protoss. Yeah, he's trying to take this middle. This is a bit throwy. We'll see if I can take the middle. Coach Shiny said it's a good way to play on this map. So we'll try, but I mean, looking at my opponent's army is just looking very difficult to do that. We have 3-2 though. Anything's possible when you have 3-2. Just keep your tanks spread out so they don't all die to like splash. And pray for a miracle. I always am making tanks. Run my SCVs. Okay. So all I'm doing now is just spreading my tanks. And you can see my opponent is definitely like my opponent is like on this bus type of build, you know. Spreading tanks is good because especially like once it's like this type of supply or this type of upgrades and supply, whatever, and against this type of style specifically, you just want to make sure you're not getting just stormed to death, because I feel like that's what happened earlier. I'm not sure. I'll have to check. So I gotta make sure I don't lose too many workers here, which, you know, of course I did. I'm gonna take this gas is depleted. I'm just gonna make you know, take a second to get all these workers here. Just queue up more workers as well. I'll leave a couple units that have been. Start my vessels as well. Vessels are good even against Templars, guys, because the Matrix can help you fight against Storm and also EMP is good. Now we can start expanding towards the bottom. So this is, you know, against this type of shit, you really have to like babysit your tanks as well to make sure they're target firing Templar. And it looks like we lost. Yeah. Unfortunate. This guy's like storming his own fucking tanks, or his own fucking units. What the fuck? Well, we can still try and play this out. Yeah. Holy shit, okay, bro. Well, we're dead. I mean, this guy's got like incredible macro for a C player. Fucking god tier gamer, man, this guy. Is that reserve? Alright. Well, GG. This guy is god mode. I mean, this guy is not that good. Well, I mean, he was pretty fucking bad, but like, I can't tell if he's C or not. Like, is this what C is? I could imagine this player being C. It's kind of hard because I feel like if someone would ask me, like, let's say I received this replay from someone and they asked me like, oh, what could I do better? Like, really, and especially after knowing what happened in the game, I would only say just play better. Like, you can't really do more than just play better. Like, this game would have been easy if I just played with more APM and like tried harder, basically. Like, a lot of those fights, I didn't sit there and like focus any of the Templar and stuff like that. This guy, for the most part, I don't know, it's just not... I mean, this is a good build order. This is like very correct build order, I will say. This wall here is pretty good too. So I'm pretty sure this person's smurfing like very hard. But I don't know what level this would be. I can't really tell. I mean, this macro is pretty spot on. But like, some of this movement was really potato, and I mean, this supply block is fat. He's floating a bunch of resources, so that's why to me it's not that impressive. Like this type of drop here, this attack was pathetic, like it was executed terribly. So it's not that big of a smurf, but and like these expansions are insanely slow. I can't tell. I really can't tell. Like this person's not that good, to be honest with you guys. So I don't know if it's actually a smurf or not. This might be C rank. But I mean, I'm guessing it's probably not C rank. I'm guessing this guy would be like B, maybe low A or something, but it's really there's no way. There's no way this guy's low A even. Maybe. Low A could be possible. But the big problem is here, I think I probably just lost to Storm. See, like, in this one fight, if I just sat here, like, really micromanaging it and targeting the Templar properly, I mean, this attack just gets mauled. But, like, after you lose this, the game's over pretty much. So anyway. Yeah, I mean, probably not C, but no, I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying, like, I don't mind losing these games. Don't get me wrong. It's just I'm also trying to give you guys a, like, I think it's the thing is, it's an easy cop-out to just say everyone's a smurf, but it doesn't really matter, honestly. It doesn't matter. If someone just outplays better than you, then, you know, you can just accept the loss, you know. But that, I mean, yeah, that, I don't know, it's, you know, that's what TVP looks like. There's, the thing is, like, I can, yeah, this game was the most helpful today because TVP looks just like this and your right just get better. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much true. Like, to be honest, like I've said, I just, it sounds like such a cope, man. Oh, I'm just sandbagging, guys. That's why I lost to the C player. But I really am. So it's like, I can see a lot of things I could just do better to win, you know, and play faster, play better, and like strategically, I did nothing wrong that game. I just got kind of outplayed. So I think, and a lot of times I get, you know, when people ask me for help or whatever, review replays and stuff like that, or, you know, when I see, like, you know, new players kind of tend to focus too much on the strategical aspect of the game. And I think a lot of people think it's a cop-out from, like, veteran players that when they say, like, oh, just play better, just play faster. But it really isn't. I think that game kind of showed it. But yeah, I mean, you are going to play Smurfs, obviously, but it doesn't matter. Like, this happens at every... Rating is not... Honestly, guys, rating is, like, the most toxic thing, especially in this game. Especially in this particular game, where basically you can make infinite accounts. Like, you can have, like, 20... Like, you can literally have, like, I don't know, 12 accounts or something. Points mean absolutely nothing, guys. So, just... don't think too much about it. Just try and practice and try and get better and try and enjoy yourself playing the game. So okay, I'm going to 15 command center here. Now generally I wall, but this time around I didn't wall because, I don't know, just felt appropriate. Though you should wall on this map. So 15 command center, then I see my opponent's going to play 3 hatch most likely. Now this is interesting fork in the road for me personally, because if my opponent does not have an in-base third hatch and is clearly taking the expansion here, I'm gonna play 2 racks. And you might think like, wow, that's, you know, what's so crazy about that? Well, a lot of players kind of default into playing 5 racks against 3 hatch because that's kind of how it used to be played, you know, like that's actually one of the main reasons. Well, the real reason people started 2 hatching a lot is because 1-1-1 became so dominant against it. But also a lot of players just feel really comfortable playing 5 racks +1 against 3 hatch Spire. But when they play this particular way, especially on Eclipse, 3 hatch 3 base or whatever, they generally play into like crazy zerg. And well, there's 2 things. First of all, you want to pressure the other base. So this is 4 hatch actually. So my opponent is just absolutely trolling. My opponent is just playing like a fucking idiot. So what the fuck? Okay, I'm just gonna check every base because obviously there's a hatchery that's missing, or the equivalent of a hatchery. Maybe my opponent thinks I'm like brain dead or something. But the power of 2 racks, there's twofold power here. One is when you play like this instead of +1 5 racks, is that with the 2 racks you can put on pressure, and obviously with a hatch on another base, you can force a lot of sunks, right? But also, okay, maybe my opponent's just really bad. But also your +2 timing is much faster, and your vessel timing is much faster, which is way better against. Okay, my opponent is just really terrible. Like absolutely C rank. So, and my opponent's actually just massing lings or some shit, man. So you can do this 2 racks build instead. Now with Firebats, you can feel really confident in pushing out. Firebat Medic can be like insanely cost effective against lings. The range. I can scan here again just to see the worker count, and this is just standard, so my opponent is just not very good. Just stim here, and then we pressure. With the Firebats, you can really feel invincible. Generally, you can't wait until Firebats against normal like 2 hatchery openings, but when it's like the slower kind of like insane build order my opponent's doing, waiting for the Firebats is better because they deal with lings a lot better. Whereas if you play against like a normal build, you just don't have time to wait for the Firebats because the mutas are out. But you know, that's something you learn as you play more games, basically. So yeah, my opponent's got mutas, no, drones, because we were pressuring. It's okay to like re-scout occasionally. I saw my factory really early. I can also get second gas. I mean, I'm so far ahead. But basically, when you have like really strong economy, it's you can just get, if you can afford this. Basically, the second gas is pure like game sense. If you can afford it, then it's really good. If you can't, that's fine. But to know whether or not you can afford it is just like playing a lot of games. And so because I can, I'm just gonna go double port here while I just defend against mutas. You don't want to go double port if your opponent's going lurkers. And there's some situations where you're going double port gets you killed, but in this specific situation, it's definitely fine. We can rescan as well. I mean, my opponent's just making a bunch of drones now. But we're in a really good spot. So now that I have like a control group, I'm gonna go back out and pressure. And I mean, I saw that there were so many drones that just morphed. Now I feel bad because now I feel like I'm smurfing. You know. I'm just gonna make extra turrets because, you know, my opponent has a lot. You know, realistically, when your opponent has this many sunks, it's probably better to just not attack because they can counterattack with mutalisks and stuff. And you can just kind of wait in your base and wait for your vessels, and this is especially true as you get higher up in rating. But you know, I mean, I did so much damage earlier and my opponent's just not very good. Doesn't really matter what I'm doing. See, this is why this 4-axis build is way better than the 5-ax, for example, against Crazy Zerg, because now I have double port going with +2 as well. It's just all very nice. Whereas +1 5-ax, you would still be upgrading your armor probably, and then, you know, starports are definitely slower. Maybe just everyone's doing F to S. Fucking... Maybe that Protoss player was also doing F to S. So we're just gonna chill. I mean, we just... Next time, you know, next time my opponent burrows, we're just going in. I can go in now. Just gonna wait for my vessels to come in. Against the... So here's one thing I will say. Against this type of play from Zerg, that's like overly defensive, and you know, that's a lot of sunks. It doesn't matter how many Marines you have, it's very difficult to bust that. Just go and expand. Just play slow, keep your army alive, that's the most important, because suddenly if you do like a failed bust, and there's like lurkers there, and they just kill you, it is hard to come back. Okay. Looks like my opponent does have an extra base, unfortunately. So that's also like a play better situation, me scouting that. You saw how I had a lot of time where I was kind of just chilling on my side of the map, kind of doing nothing with any of my units. I definitely had the opportunity to at least check some of these expansions, or I could have scanned them. Like if I look at my energy, it's still kind of high. Excuse me, so it was definitely a mistake to not scan that. And now we're just macroing. Just macroing. That would be so annoying if I had to cancel this. Fucker. And just sit here. So one way to get ahead, like, and to break this type of stalemate is definitely to go battlecruisers. I mean, battlecruisers in general are really good. You don't want to drop. So right now the game plan basically is to just prevent my opponent from taking another base, and to establish my own base. And you know, you could think about dropping, but dropping, like, especially on this map with these types of bases, like, this base is very compact. I mean, this is obviously compact, and this bottom base as well is extremely compact, so you can't really drop it. And going tanks just to, like, going tanks is also not a good idea, because, you know, it's too late. Like, an opponent with Nidus can easily just Nidus in a Defiler, Dark Swarm, and suddenly you can't, you know, your tanks just lose value. So really, I'm just thinking about making battlecruisers right now. Okay, it's that simple. Take this expansion. The other thing is, well, I won't. If your opponent happens to get like Hydra upgrades and stuff, that's one thing to look out for. Then you definitely want to make tanks. Okay. Always make tanks against that. We're gonna get battlecruisers here. I can get the energy upgrade first, then Yamato. Doesn't really matter. Takes forever to get Yamato anyway. Okay. I'll bring these medics here. Let's re-rally this real quick. Can make bunkers as well. Bunkers are really effective at holding bases. The one thing is, if my opponent had a Nidus here, it could be really annoying to like deal with. So one thing that's a trick is you can scan ahead and irradiate something, and then shift click back, and the vessels with energy will keep going forward, whereas the vessels without energy won't. So for example, I'll do it here because now I actually have vessels that don't have energy. I'll irradiate here and shift click away, and you see these vessels don't have energy, so they're going away. So it's very easy to spot. It's very good tech to have. And when you're going battlecruisers, definitely always make +1 air weapons, because basically that will enable your battlecruisers to one-shot Scourge always. Okay, and obviously, like, if you don't one-shot Scourge, you're kind of in trouble. Now, again, the plan is to just delay bases, just make battlecruisers, and go kill this gas. If you can kill the gas, you don't have to kill the base. Honestly, the gas is the most important thing to kill. So you see how those vessels that don't have energy, they just go away? Fuck. And yeah, I mean, so in late game TVZ, the easiest way to lose is by having the filer reach your natural. So really, there's a couple things in these types of situations when you have map control. You don't want Zerg to get too many bases, because then they have too much gas to work with. But you also don't want Zerg to counterattack your main. So those are the two main things that you're doing. So I'm denying expansions, and also, again, that's what I said. My opponent here doesn't have, well, he has a Nidus now, so now we have to be careful. So now I was going to move my army away from there. But, yeah. Yeah, so that's honestly guys, that's kind of the downside of playing Terran is, to be honest, like Terran's just a very esoteric race, man. It's just, you can't, like, if you're Protoss, if you're Zerg, you can kind of just end the game when you have a big dick advantage, you just fucking A-move. Terran just doesn't work that way, you just can't, you know? You just can't play like that. So this is gonna be another Protoss player, C rank, who's probably also doing an F to S, and it's gonna absolutely murder us. you scan them, go 3-hatch lurker. Are you looking for faster tank tech? Maybe 2-fact? No. So with the lurkers, it doesn't really matter. What matters is whether or not they're trying to all in you, basically. Like, if you see when. So with lurker openings, because Zerg can play it two ways. I mean, they can either play it to all in you, which is generally how they play it, or they play it to take a third base, you know, and play defensively and get into hive, like kind of accelerate it like that. And against like the passive hive player going lurkers, which is again rare, you know, most Zergs that open lurkers will try and all in you with it, which is why you want to go into tanks. But passive players will basically, you know, there are some players that will open lurkers just to get their expansions going, because whatever, they don't want to like micro mutalisks. And against those players, you still want to go 2-port. You don't actually want to go factory, because they'll have like a fast enough hive. I mean, you can go tank push as well, you know, it definitely works better because there's not mutalisks to worry about, but sometimes they do go mutalisks anyway. But the 2-port really is to just play late game. Think of it as that. Tanks are there for, I would say the better way to understand it isn't to understand it in terms of this like mutalisk lurker dichotomy and tank 2-port dichotomy, but rather just low eco games and high eco games. So like, which can also translate into more aggressive games or more passive games. So like if the Zerg's playing like a passive game, then you also want to play a passive game. If Zerg's playing like an aggressive game, you want to play an aggressive game. Like if there's Zerg's really pressuring you and like keeping you low eco, then tanks make more sense. It depends on their timing as well. And I mean, this can be kind of, you know, that's why TVZ is really interesting, because it's the most, like, I would say it's the most balanced matchup in the game, like design-wise as well, is either player can choose to go for the proactive play. Like, Terran can choose to go for tanks if they want to, though I would say it's generally the Zerg that sets the pace, like, not Terran, not as much, but you definitely can't, but maybe that's just the way I perceive the game. That's maybe one of my weaknesses, who knows. But I generally go, I reactively go, generally my plan is the 2-port, but I'll reactively go tanks if I need to. Depends on what I scout, it depends. Depends on what Zerg's doing, there's so many conditionals. But anyway, TVP, yeah, I mean, I might have to take a break because I'm starting to like rot in my brain. Right now I'm just checking whether there's a zealot or not. Like I said before, and we see the range, we also see the Dragoon. Just run away from the Dragoon. Run away, but in the opposite direction of your base. Because obviously you don't want the Dragoon to like kill your SCV and be right next to your command center. This time I will open with a Vulture. I'm going to cancel this Marine because I noticed this Dragoon chasing my SCV, and the Marine can make relatively fast. So if ever the Dragoon kind of changes course, I can reactively make an SCV. And the reason I'm making a Vulture is because this SCV is tied up right now, and it won't be able to basically re-scout the Nexus. So I'm going to be able to scout with my Vulture instead, you see? Now I'm going to make this machine shop, I'm going to make the bunker, and you're safe. Even against the second goon, you're safe. Because, you know, my Vulture and my other Marine was going to finish in case my opponent went straight to my base. So yeah. And now we get a scout. If we can get up the ramp, that's nice, but we can't. So this looks very standard for my opponent, so I'm just going to go Armory. Although, I can't really confirm whether or not he has an... whether or not he has range, but it's very unlikely with this opening. I mean, like, double goon, we saw this spinning earlier. It's just very unlikely that my opponent went, like, canceled the range and got a Citadel and still got this Nexus, right? So I can go Armory first and then I'll go eBay. Well, in this game I could go Academy, but because I've been telling you guys about this eBay shit, I'll just go eBay. But this game, particularly speaking, I would definitely go Academy. Because the eBay is kind of pointless. Well, it's not pointless. It's not pointless, because the reality is Academy could be a bit too late at this point. Actually, so eBay's good. eBay's safe. Yeah, that's the thing. eBay's just safe here. Because my opponent could still go Citadel after expansion, in which case I'm not sure that my Academy would be on time. So I started my... So what I usually do is I like getting 3 vultures no matter what in the early game. Whether it's no tank, 3 vultures, 1 tank, 3 vultures, 2 tanks, 3 vultures. With mines. And, you know, it's a good way of... I mean, mines in this matchup, mines are just all... You always want to try and get mines out. You'll notice pros all the time, they like push out, try and get some map control, try and mine up bases. So, it is important. Here I'm going to get my second factory, and then start my academy. Make sure my my depots are building. And right about now, 6:10-ish, I'm gonna get turrets, 3 turrets like this. So I'll have 4 total turrets. And get siege mode as well. Siege is really important to get at this stage because basically obs timing is around now. And if you forget to get siege, yeah, see, so ob's finished. And now, if you are only relying on your mines to defend your front door, the Protoss would just walk to your base and kill you. Okay. And now is around the time you want to get your starport as well. See. It's just a very standard game here. My academy never built is the only problem. So that's really annoying, but you know, it's fine. You have to get used to dealing with unoptimal situations because it happens to everyone at all levels. Honestly, that's the beauty of this game. That's also why it's so it feels fresh every game. Like, I think when the game's too easy to execute, like StarCraft 2, it becomes way too linear, if that makes sense. Like, it becomes too stale, too dry, because everyone has like perfect execution, everyone has perfect build orders, but consistently as well. But in Brood War, that's not the case. If someone has like consistently good build orders and shit, they're like pro gamers, you know. Takes like a ridiculous amount of skill. So I got mine first, then siege, then speed. That's usually how I progress my factory research. And we're gonna get to this point where I'm gonna start these upgrades, get my second add-on, and then we can start the command center as well. Because my comm sets are a bit late, it's definitely a bit off. I would want to be scanning early so I can figure out if this is a carrier builder or not. Because if it is, you don't want to build a command center. So you see with that scan, I saw probes getting ready to transfer. But like my opponent's actually playing well, covering this. So there's not much I can do. Maybe come in here, nope. So that was good for my opponent, but my opponent's third base is definitely slow. So this is fine. This is fine. Man, C rank's hard, man. You actually have to play. Like, it's no joke, boys. Or is it Terran that's hard? Okay, now I'm gonna get some factories as well. I'm gonna push out because I want to take this base. We can rescan, but I mean, I know my opponent's going for arbiters. So I know I said you can take your third base whenever you know your opponent's going for like this type of arbiter build. But I will say Eclipse, it's a bit different because Eclipse, it's just your third base is just so hard to take. So I would almost never take my base on location on this map, to be honest with you guys. Never. So before you go out and kind of like pressure with vultures, you want to make sure that your third base gets established, right? So don't try and do too many things at once. Like, if anything, it's kind of like counterintuitive, because I feel like a lot of people talk about, oh, multitask, do everything at once, but actually, as you get better at this game, and like everyone gets closer to, for example, executing optimally, if you split your attention up too much, then everything you do is weak, right? Like, let's say I have a bunch of supply tied up somewhere else on the map, then all of a sudden I die to a bust. And that supply that's tied up on the map, it's not even that much supply, because, you know, it's just a portion of my army, so... And this is especially true as Terran, so... You don't want to do too much at once, okay? You want to kind of like try and divvy up your stuff, but, you know, as you get... You know, I got more units now, and now I can think about going out on the map and pressuring, okay? Try and not miss too many depots, because I am right now. Upgrades finished. Okay, Arbiter's out. So when the Arbiter's out, that's really when you start wanting to get ready for recall. So right now I can just bring back these vultures, start making turrets, vessel EMP, put mines here, put mines on my third base. So recall locations generally, the big recalls are like your third base. Your natural is like the worst place to recall, so generally, even if Protoss recalls there, it's so easy to defend that, in my opinion, you don't actually need mines. You really need mines in your main base, and specifically around your factories. Because if they get a hold of your factories, then, you know, they're killing your reinforcing units, and it's just not a good time, you know? And then you want to just build turrets, like, perimeter around your base. So really around your factories is the most important, I've found. You can also make, you know, you can also make them like, just put them down. As long as you have, basically as long as you have mines in your base, they're gonna do work. Because whether or not, whether Protoss recalls on top of mines or not, the reality is a lot of the units are gonna start wandering around your main, and they're gonna trigger mines. You know, so it doesn't really matter. But obviously, like, ideally you get that juicy fucking detonation on the recall. So I'm trying to get to 9 fact here. And then, before we push out on this map especially, the way you want to play is kind of... So notice my grouping, by the way. I have all the tanks on separate hotkeys, vultures on separate hotkeys, and then vessels and Goliaths together. So on this map, you want to kind of mine this area up first and take it behind your push, because you're gonna start getting running out of resources. Can I hit the CMP? I didn't even need to. It was actually straight up gonna die. So kind of a waste, but whatever. And now that I have that base going, I don't see any kind of threat. This is where it's really important to make sure that all your scanners are hotkeyed, because you need to scan ahead to like EMP arbiters or know where the army is. So try and find the Protoss army first, okay? When they position like this, yeah, this is why this matchup is just so hard at lower levels. The only way to deal with this is to just plant mines and leave a couple tanks behind and then go forward with your army, okay? And this is how you always deal with this kind of shit. And we're gonna just keep our units balled up. I don't have EMP. Just keep them balled up. I'm constantly trying to A-move my vultures, make sure they're actually attacking. Make sure you're macroing. And before going out, take care of this stuff. You know, make sure you transfer your workers, get this base operational. Wait for your army to regroup, because I have a couple of units kind of on the way there. Make sure you're making vessels. I kind of forgot, but you know, whatever. EMP that. Now I can unsiege A-move this guy, but I'll be disciplined here. I'm just gonna come, and my goal is to cut off these two bases, okay? And I have a nice reinforcement path that can't really be too fucked with. So instead of going for the base, I'm just gonna kill the Protoss bases. Try and focus this Templar if you can. My opponent's kind of attacking. I'm just gonna lift this to safety first. Make sure I kill these bases, because I'm still mining on 2 base. I'm happy with this situation. I don't need to, like, look at my bank. Like, I'm in no hurry to get this base mining again, right? So I'm just gonna make sure that I kill these 2 bases. They're worth far more than my opponent's, than my own base. But okay, now that it's safe, I'm just gonna land this back. Okay, it's that easy. Just very calm defense. Now my opponent's gonna try. Now if you have some extra APM, you can kind of use your reinforcements here. Just lay. The more mines you lay, the better. It's just they do so much. You just really want to lay them, because then when your opponent tries to like push, basically if they try to run through them, they just die. And if they try and sit there to like kill them with goons, it just takes forever. I can scan this, just make sure there's no base. And now. Okay, notice I killed these 2 nexuses. I have a bunch of supply on my base. I'm just gonna go back. Just play very safe. Make sure I get all my units together so that I have one big dick push. You know, if you have more APM, make sure this is hotkeyed as well. If you have more APM, make sure you're making turrets. And now I'm just gonna take the time to hotkey these, as long as it's fast. Now we're gonna barrel down here, even if my opponent's like counterattacking. At this point, I have such a huge bank that I can afford to lose bases. Try an EMP, it's hard as fuck to EMP. But we gotta now siege everything. Now this type of situation, it's nice to like have your tanks sieged, or tanks hotkeyed. And also, this is one thing that you can get better at, but at this point, definitely add more factories. Definitely you want to add as many factories as can fit in your base, because you want to be able to remax as soon as possible. Now my opponent's going to go for like some Mongo attack. We're just going to use our reinforcements to defend, and these units we're going to go and basically cut off the production, okay? Micro lecture on what, dude? Well, guys, the thing is, again, I'll say this. First of all, okay, I'm gonna hit you guys with some cold, hard facts, okay? I'll hit you guys some cold, hard facts. Terran is the hardest race to play, and it's not OP, okay? It's a very strong race. It's definitely not overpowered. Now, the reason why I mentioned this is hard to do, and I want to mention that Terran is hard to play, is because it is objectively really fucking hard to play this race in this matchup. There is no the burden of knowledge and execution is heavily imbalanced in this matchup, okay, especially in the earlier levels, especially if you want to play like I'm playing, which is like very standard, like upgrade Terran style. Okay, it's extremely hard to play. I don't expect lower level players to be able to play this way for a long time, because likewise, if you look at top foreigners, actually no one plays like this. There's actually no Terran. I'm literally the only Terran that plays Korean TVP consistently. And like this I'm actually confident in, because I've seen literally every Terran player's TVP. This is incredibly hard to play this way consistently as well, and it doesn't really have that much return. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden you can absolutely kill everyone and you win. Now, Terran's really strong, don't get me wrong, and it's strong to contest, you know, especially Protoss in the late game. But especially these days, this matchup's really difficult, because Protoss has so many options. Protoss is also figuring out that carriers can be insta-win in certain conditions, because if Terran kind of does stuff like really fast expansions, like commits to third base upgrade style, and Protoss is already on 2-base carrier, it's very hard to contest that, because it's just how it works out. Carrier numbers get up too high, and if you don't have timing attack against them. But also, Protoss can also play like super bust style, they can play arbiter style, they can definitely contest the late game as well. So why is it important to admit this? Because, well, I mean, it's kind of like dangerous to say these things, because then it turns into this cope where like Terran players are like, you know, this race sucks, this matchup's imbalanced, blah blah blah, which is not true. Okay, you can definitely get good enough to win at this matchup consistently, even at the pro level. But you're gonna lose a fuck ton, and the reason why I mention it in this game is because, you know, in this position here, this type of move here, so a lot of like how Protoss does to deal with like attacks from Terran. By the way, my opponent has like respectable I mean, my opponent has respectable macro. You can tell Protoss is definitely behind this game, even though you look at the supplies and you're like, oh, that looks normal. Protoss should have a bank right now, basically. So their infrastructure wise, they're behind. They should definitely have way more resources. This type of move here, where Protoss, a lot of the times, how they deal with like this late game mech is they'll just run around with their units, like try and counterattack and avoid your army. And as Terran, you basically have to chase the Protoss army. But especially on this map on Eclipse, if you ever chase the army and you take a fight here, like you just almost always lose. Like you can't push through this high ground unless you somehow catch Protoss out of position and you get this position for free, okay? But generally you don't want to just push into high ground ever. So you kind of have to go through this area. But if Protoss kind of just postures here and waits for you to move like here and then counters, you have to have some sort of like defense back at home. So you have to put like mines, and you have to leave some tanks behind to buffer. And that's like a skill that you develop as you play more and more. And this is even more like exacerbated on 4-player maps, where Protoss can just straight up avoid your army nonstop. And you have to learn to chase the Protoss army, but also whenever you get like positions like this, for example, you have to learn to put mines down and leave a couple tanks to really constrict Protoss's movement. And I mean, that is insanely hard to do. Okay, like mechanically it's insanely hard to do. While macroing, while making sure you're expanding, while keeping track of where your vessels are so that you know when to EMP and shit. And, I mean, don't get me wrong. When Protoss players play against Terran players that know what they're doing and like play like this and play well, PvT is exceedingly hard. I mean, it's insanely hard. It's insanely hard, especially late game. Like, mech is just so strong, and Protoss needs to have perfect engagements to win the fights. Like, perfect stasis, perfect storms, perfect also, like, engagements from their units. Like, Terran, you don't really care too much about how you engage. I would say, especially late game, you're really mostly focused on making sure your tank siege and your vultures kind of stay, like, all your units kind of stay clumped up. But Protoss, really, they have to, like, really make sure their units are coming in at the right angles. Make sure they don't single file in, but also they have to micro every single spell. So they'll have like shuttles with storm in them, and they'll have arbiters with stasis and stuff. And after those big fights, they have to start dealing with mines again, and like, you know, anyway, the matchup is really hard for Protoss, don't get me wrong, but it's only like, it's conditional on the Terran playing well. Whereas if the Terran plays poorly, you just free win. It's just impossible to lose this matchup. Terran's like so weak without proper play. Whereas like if Protoss plays poorly, you still have to play well as Terran, if that makes sense. If that concept makes sense. So there's a huge burden for Terran in this matchup for sure, executionally speaking. Like, anyway. And I think it's important to know, you know, especially if you play Terran, because I think as a beginning Terran player, you will just be discouraged, honestly, because it's just really hard. You know what I'm saying? So it's important to know these things. But that being said, you know, it's easy to overcome. But I wouldn't say it's overpowered. Yeah, you gotta know what you're in for, but it's not an excuse. Here's the thing, okay? It's not an excuse to like cope. First of all, to use it as a cope, okay? So like, if you lose to like your Protoss friend, to sit there and be like, oh, you're fucking PvT, blah, 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 like, have a fucking stroke about it and stuff. That's not acceptable. And second of all, again, this is one thing that people will kind of never understand, but you should never compare your experiences with others. I mean, this is kind of true in general, but especially with StarCraft, but especially not with other races. Like, you know, if your friend is playing Protoss, or if your friend is playing Zerg and they're just having this and that success, and maybe you're not, or if you're playing Terran or whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, just stop comparing yourself to others. It's just such a pointless exercise. Like, you can be like, TVP, like, the reality is TVP is hard, okay? Terran is overall, Terran is obviously the hardest race to play, and this comes from someone who's played all the races. I mean, my Protoss is by far my worst, and I'm terrible at Protoss, you know, I must say that. But I know that it's not, like, Terran's just insanely hard to play, and it's not that much stronger than the other two races, if at all. So if you're gonna be hit with the reality of like, wow, this race really is fucking hard to play, I hate it, I hate you for playing the easy race, or like, oh, this matchup is fucking impossible, fuck you, or whatever, then just don't play the fucking race. You know, if you really think this matchup's impossible and it's not for you, then fucking play Protoss. Or play Zerg. Play another fucking race. Don't sit there and just be like, oh, my race is impossible. It's like a choice, you know, guys? Like, I'm playing Terran. I used to play Zerg when I started. Basically, I played Zerg since like 2007. And then I switched like, what was it, 4 years ago at this point? This must have been a while, 3 or 4 years ago. And I switched because I wanted to play Terran. because I have fun playing Terran, and I don't like. I think it's obviously it's easily a competitive race. Like, don't get me wrong, right? But it is just straight up harder than the other races. Like, there's no fucking other way around it. And you know, for comparison, it's such a fucking silly conversation I'm having. But I think it's important, like, information. And I'm sure a lot of people might agree or disagree with me, and that's fine. For comparison, I think Zerg is just as hard as Terran. But it is a stronger race. It's, like, way more rewarding the better you get. Like, it's just way stronger. You absolutely, like, you know, Zerg absolutely farms Protoss. And then versus Terran can be very even. Like, it's ZVT, TVZ, in my opinion, these days is such an even matchup skill-wise. I think at lower levels, it's obviously a bit easier for Terran because they can get, like, you know, they can win a game with, like, a sunk bus or, like, a lucky drop. But, the more I've played Terran, the more I've realized it's not quite like that. And Protoss is definitely kind of like the worst race, the weakest race for sure. But, you know, it's just so much easier to be consistent and solid with them that you can have really good results. And, you know, I mean, they're all three. I mean, this game's like pretty much fucking balanced. Okay, like generally it's just the better player that wins. But it's important to be aware of these things because, like, what I'm doing here is not trivial. Like, a lot of you guys, like, the other part that, the other reason I would like to, you know, the other reason I'm mentioning these things is because also sometimes, like, I'm very harsh on myself, and I'm like, I can't believe these fucking pros, they can fucking do this so easily, and I'm fucking struggling with it. Like, why the fuck can't I play like this? And then maybe you guys, while you're learning, you're, like, being too hard on yourselves. You're like, fuck, I'm so fucking bad. Why can't I just do this? And I'm just mentioning that this is, like, you know, even playing like this is extremely hard. Like, look, I was fucking sandbagging this game, and I'm going up to like 3:50 APM in this moment because there's just no other way around executing this properly. Okay, so, but obviously, you know, against a potato, you see how like it just Perez just gets fucking ass fucked, man. Like, it's just, look at, it's like a meat grinder. Like, he's just getting fucking railed. Look at these supplies, you know, just absolutely fucked. Right? There was no chance this game for Protoss, but it takes a long time to get to this skill level. So anyway, doesn't really matter. These are like all esoteric concepts that, you know, kind of flies over people's heads. Oh my god, I'm never gonna get out of C, man. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it there, guys, because I'm kind of getting tired. I didn't play too many games. I spent a lot of time explaining. I think probably starting next time, I'll just try and, like, speed run into S. Well, I'll try and just play game after game and kind of explain stuff without stopping too much, but we'll see. But I'm kind of done for now. I'm getting tired because I've just been talking nonstop for like 3 hours. I'm not done streaming. I'm just done. I'm done.